Hi Lovelies, I'm gonna show you guys how I made my Yun Jin cosplay, but firstly I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the character.
Yun Jin is honestly one of my favorite characters in Genshin Impact, not just because of how amazing she looks, but because of the rich cultural background she embodies. She's the director of the Yunhan Opera Troupe in Liyue, and is celebrated for her talent as both a singer and dancer in Chinese opera. It's so cool that her character is based on this traditional art form, which is such a huge part of Chinese culture. What I really love is that MiHoYo actually went the extra mile and got a real Peking opera singer to perform Yun Jin's in-game singing. It makes her feel so authentic and adds a whole new level of depth to her character. Having cosplayed Yun Jin, I feel like I'm not just bringing a Genshin Impact character to life, but also celebrating a beautiful piece of cultural heritage.
So I'm talking here, but the sound is really bad, so I'm gonna do a voiceover instead, because it just sounds a lot better. So the first thing I did was to order some fabric samples, and when they arrived I took a picture of two of them, the ones that I like the best, and asked people on Instagram which one I should go for. And most people really like the one with the design, the dragon design, which is really cool. But when I had money and I could order, it was actually sold out, which was really sad because I really wanted the one with the design because it's so cool. So I had to go with the other one. But I really like the other one as well because the color fits Jun Jin a lot better. But I usually like to add some detailing into the fabric. I really like how Doki Doki does their own costumes. A lot of the Genshin characters has a lot of really pretty fabric with some detailing. The color is right and there's some detailing in the fabric which is really cool. So I kind of wanted to do the same thing with my Yun Jin. This fabric is so gorgeous though. I ordered it from a store in the UK called Minerva. I highly recommend them. They have a lot of options, fabric options, which we don't really have here in Norway. So on Yun Jin's skirt, on the sides, there's a stripe which is a little bit darker. And how I did that was that I went into the same fabric in black. On the sides, I added some heat and bond, but it's not really cold that here, and I think we only have like one type, which is a light one, I suppose. But it doesn't really matter because I did satin stitching anyway. So here is the satin stitch foot, or at least I think it is, because I have this set with a lot of sewing machine foots, and this is the satin stitch foot. So the fabric I'm using, I think it was called Dupion. It's a very light plasticky fabric, and I had to use stabilization when I did the satin stitches. At first I tried one of those sprays that make the fabric a little bit stiffer, but it didn't really help because the fabric gathers a lot when you try to satin stitch because it's very light. So I then did a little bit of googling and research, found out that you usually need to use a stabilization kind of paper thing. I don't know if you can call it paper, but anyway, looking nice. So yeah, I done one side. It looks really nice actually. So I'm gonna, I guess, rip it off and see how it is, which is gonna be nice for you guys. The first thing I did was to add the stabilization on top and then stitch. But the issue then is that when you are gonna tear it apart later, you can kind of see the residue through the stitches, which is kind of bad. So I had to turn it around and put the stabilization on the bottom, underneath, and then stitch on top. And how I attach the stabilization is that I just use the tape that kind of disappears in water, which is really nice. So yeah, that's how I attach it or make it stabilize the stabilizer when you sew it. Yes. The detailing of how I struggle with the detailing on this costume. Oh. Before I start yapping about the struggles with the detailing, I did go with fabric and it's hidden bonds. So that's that. The original plan was to use vinyl, but the issue with vinyl is that our local store only sells pretty small sheets of vinyl. I think it's 30 by 50, which is kind of small. And Yun Jin has pretty big design, so I would need a pretty large sheet. I also went on to Coscraft to see if they had the right color, which they didn't. Was really sad because they don't pre-cut the vinyl like the other store. So You can buy 1 meter, you can buy 2 meter, you can buy 3 meter, how much you'd like, and that's really nice. It's kinda expensive though, but it's worth it for a large sheet. You have to cut it out by hand since it's that big as well, but I have done a lot of vinyl cutting by hand, so it's fine. But having the Cricut and not being able to use it because of the design being so large is kind of frustrating. So not being able to use vinyl, I then went over to fabric, but I'm not really familiar with fabric, so I didn't really know which type of fabric I should buy in order to do the heat and bond technique, so I just had to try something. I was very lucky with the blue one I'm using on the skirt here, because that one looked really nice. It's a very thin fabric, so it melted super easily. I did melt a little bit on my iron, so you have to protect the iron from it, also protecting the fabric because it melts. It's really bad. But since it's also very thin, it looks really nice. But I was really unlucky with the other type of fabric I used for the skirt and the sleeves, because that fabric is frying like crazy and it looks really bad. And it's so sad because I wanted this entire piece to look really good. Back to whatever I was doing before. So I had 2 similar pieces that I did sew together. I think you call it bag lining when you do it like that. And you keep a little section of it unsewn so that you can actually turn it inside out, which I also did with all of the pieces. I didn't sew the top of it because you don't need to sew the top of it because you're gonna hide that inside waistband later on anyway. It gets very baggy when you do it this way. Hence the name bag lining, I suppose. So you have to iron it all flat. And then I laid all of them on the floor so I could pin them to my waistband better. And then I did sew it to the waistband, and then you have to hand stitch to close it shut. I also made this Chinese knot, and I'm trying to show you guys how I did it. It's kind of hard to show, but I'm gonna link the video I used down in this description anyway. So you can look at that one instead, and I think they do it a little bit better than what I'm doing. But I'm trying! It's so hard to show. But I think this looks really cool. The only thing is that the ribbon thing looks a little bit droopy. It's hanging a little bit, which is a little bit annoying. So I think I should have added some wire or something to stabilize it and make it actually hold its shape. But I really like the idea of having this Chinese knot as an extra detail. So yeah, and that's the top skirt, and I like how I'm using my preppy look. And if you're saying, Henrik, that's not preppy, you know what? I prepared this outfit, meaning it's actually preppy. So it looks so funny with the skirt and my preppy outfit. I've been struggling a little bit with the top part of the dress, because this part was sticking out a lot, so I had to minimize it. And I don't really know how to change a existing pattern, like make the sizes different. So I kind of just did a thing. I think I'm gonna take in the arms a little bit, or I guess the opening, the sides. I thought I had filmed a lot more of the dress progress, but apparently not, so I don't have a lot of clips for the dress itself. I can't do anything about that now, so I'm just gonna show you guys what I have and try and explain a little bit, I suppose. So on the front of Yun Jin's dress, she has kind of a braided rope design going down, one on both sides. Mine is a little bit on a thinner side, but that was what I had, so I went with it anyway. I'm so happy that I bought this set with new sewing foots, because I really needed it. And I also used this invisible zipper for the invisible zipper foot for the zipper, and I think I did a really good job. At this point, the dress is close to being finished, and I don't really have any in-between shots, so this is it. I have just sewn all of the pieces together, follow the pattern I have. The skirt is on, the design on the skirt is also done, but I'm gonna redo that later and you will see it pretty soon. You can also see that I have some interfacing on the edges around the entire thing, and that's to make it a little bit more stabilized. But I also am gonna change the lining later. I did the entire bodice again with a new lining and fabric and everything, so that entire piece you see now is all one. I redid everything because I messed up the lining after I had sewn everything together, and it was pretty much done. I only had to sew the arms on, but I messed up that bad that I had to redo the entire bodice, which is kind of sad, but sometimes you just have to restart. I find it really hard to explain progress like this, but you can see the front of the dress and also the front of the lining itself. You kind of just lay it flat, and then you sew around the neckline, which I'm trying to show you guys here, but it's kind of blurry and short. You can also see this is the new part with the new lining, and I really like the lining. It's a little bit thicker, so I didn't use the stabilization thing interfacing on this part, because the lining itself is a thick fabric. But I also really liked this one a lot better. It was also way easier to work with like the thin normal type of just lining fabric, because it's very thin and very hard to work with, but this was really easy and it looks so pretty. And it doesn't really matter that it's black, because you don't really see it, and black is, I feel like black is kind of a neutral color that you can use with a lot of projects anyway. So the new lighting is on. It took a little bit to redo the entire thing, but I think it looks really nice. So you sew the lining part to the main body with the machine, but the rest you're gonna do with hands, with your hands. You're gonna hand sew the rest to make it look pretty and nice. And I haven't really done a lot of hand sewing before, so I did learn a lot making this entire costume. This is something I really need help with, but the edge around the skirt, you sew this, I guess, this piece onto it, but I don't really know how to like finish it or make it actually stay up, because you only sew it to the sides or where there are seams, like 3 spots, making the, I guess, the inside droopy, and that's why I have all of the pins to keep it up, and I don't really understand how you're supposed to actually keep it stay up, because there's nothing to like sew it to. So what I did is that I just used my heat and bond around the entire thing to make it stay up, but that feels very messy, and I would like to know how you are supposed to do it, because I don't understand. You can also see that the petticoat is actually done, because that's the first part I made, so I'm gonna show you guys that after the dress. I just decided to show the dress before, but yeah, the petticoat is done. You can also see how messy the design on the dress is. The gray detailing. The fabric is fraying a lot, so this is the part that I'm gonna rip off and do paint instead. So I made a stencil. I used my Cricut to make a stencil, a clean cut stencil. It's beautiful. I had to make it in 2 parts since the design is very big, and I just slapped the stencil on the dress. You have to do a little bit of freehand when you take the stencil off, but it's easy and it looks clean anyway, so I'm very happy that I went in with paint. One of the reasons why I didn't do this the first time is because my mat was really small, but I later bought a large Cricut mat so that I could actually make a larger design. Because if I use the tiniest mat, I would need to cut the design into 3 pieces, I suppose, or even 4, but I think 3 would be okay. Making it a little bit stressful, but with the large mat, you just have to cut it into 2 pieces and kind of stick them together. Cuffs time, I have ironed on a medium interfacing, because this part needs a little bit more of a stabilization. So I have taken my sparkly PVC vinyl fabric, and I have already ironed on some, what's it called, fusion bond. I used a strong heat and bond for the PVC fabric, but drawing on it is impossible because like the protection layer is very plasticky and slippery, so I tried to draw it onto paper and then glue that paper onto the piece, but it was really slippery and moving around, so I was struggling a lot to cut out the design because I wanted it to look crisp and nice. My Cricut wouldn't cut it either. It was just scraping the fabric, so it looked all messy and bleh. So I had to do it by hand. And let me tell you, this was a lot harder than it looks. But after all of that struggle, I had my piece and I ironed it onto the cuff part with the interfacing. And I later figured out that I should have done that last to make it look a little bit nicer, I suppose. But anyway, done is done. In order to make the button loop clasp, you just take a piece of fabric, you kind of fold it, you iron it, and then you just sew it inside the cuffs. And then you got yourself a really nice button loop clasp. And the last thing you do with the cuffs is to bagline it, turn it inside out, done. And yeah, of course, iron it as well. Moving on to the sleeve itself. And here you can see that I have drawn out the design. This is actually the heat and bond, the lighter version I have. And just cutting it out, it looks a little bit uneven. So we have now the satin stitch, the black one. This one look a little bit better than this one. I did a little upsie, so I had to redo. But when I tried to like open or take off with this thing, I managed to stab and rip open the main fabric, so I'm not sure how to fix that. So it looks so messy on the other side. I'm gonna fix that. So there's a hole. So the black on the sleeve is satin stitched, and I used the carbon paper to kind of draw out where I need to iron onto the design that I cut out a bit earlier, trying to make it look nice and even Steven. Also using my measuring tape, or whatever you call it, to actually measure out where to place the design so it actually lines up when you're gonna sew it shut, I suppose. Sleeve sewn. I'm gonna take this to my sewing machine and actually sew some gathering stitches in the front here. So yeah, I'm gonna do that now. You leave a little bit of the top open. You don't sew the entire way down, because there's gonna be a little bit of an opening. Looks nice and cute. And when sewing the gathering stitches, you do 2 lines. And this is gonna help with the gathering. You also have a little bit more reinforcement, because there's 2 threads instead of 1. So it doesn't snap that easily, and it will help with the gathering as well, so it's gonna be a little bit easier. And the thing you're gonna sew onto the gathered piece, you try to sew it in the middle of those 2 lines you did, the parallel lines. And that's also because the part in between is gonna be way flatter, so the end result will look a lot nicer and cleaner and prettier when you do it like this. You see me kind of fold it to show you guys how it's supposed to look when you're done, because you need to hand sew this. So you can see that I added a diamond in the middle of the circle on the sleeve, and that's kind of to hide some of like the mistakes. It looks a little bit uneven when I cut it. Circles are really hard to cut by hand, so I think the diamond helps a little bit with that. And you can kind of see the ribbon being a little bit of a droop. And so this is the sleeve. I think it looks nice though. So yeah, nice. I mentioned that the petticoat was the first thing I did, so I actually have a lot of clips for the petticoat since it was the first thing I did, and I was thinking that I need to be pretty good at filming and film a lot. But anywho, the first thing I obviously did is to lay out my fabric, line it, draw on it, cut it, and start sewing. I feel like this is pretty straightforward. It's just a skirt with a gathered gathered fabric at the bottom to make it a little bit fluffy, I suppose. So this was actually my very first time doing an invisible zipper on this petticoat. And I followed a pretty good tutorial, which I will be linking down below, so you can follow that one instead. I can try and explain it as good as I can. So the first thing you do is to add a little strip of interfacing where the zipper is gonna go, and then you do a basting stitch, and then you iron it, as you can see that I have done. A basting stitch is a temporary stitch, by the way. You also have to iron open the zipper teeth on the zipper itself, so it lays flat. And when that is done, you take your zipper and you hand stitch it to the seam allowance. And this is just to have the zipper attached to wherever you're gonna sew it. That's when you take the entire piece over to the sewing machine and you sew the zipper on. And voila, you should have an invisible zipper. And if you're asking yourself, why is there so many steps in order to attach an invisible zipper? And that's because perfection takes time. You sew the entire skirt together, and then you do the gathering, and it needs a lot of ruffles. So the part that is gonna turn into the ruffles around the entire skirt, I did French seams on those. And I did that before hemming. So I have all of the pieces sewn together. Looks like a weird tube toilet paper looking scarf. So this is gonna turn into the nice looking ruffles. And as I mentioned before, you do 2 parallel, I guess, stitches on the entire thing, and it's pretty long, so you have to stitch for a while. Pin the ruffles to the skirt and then adjust it however you need to adjust it. And here you can see that I'm trying to sew in the middle of those parallel lines I did. Also make sure that your fabric is flat when you start sewing, because mine was not. Mine was on a fold, so don't be dumb as me and make sure it's not. So yeah, I have to undo this, but it's not really that much, so it's gonna be fine. And I'm gonna restart. Look at me, I'm a pretty princess. Yeah, you can kind of see that the I guess the fabric is a little bit see-through, so I didn't pick the best fabric, I suppose, but sad. And the last thing you do is the waistband. So the waistband is long, it's rectangular, it's just a square. You add interfacing, you then fold it, you iron it flat, you sew the edges only, you snip off the little corner, and then you turn it inside out, and then you iron it flat. You can see how see-through it is. Actually really bad, and I didn't really notice that before now, but yeah, that's really see-through actually. Now that you kind of have a finished waistband, you sew one edge of it onto the skirt, and then you fold the other part and you hand stitch. So the skirt is a lot shorter now than it was before. I don't really know if you can tell just by looking at it like this. But looking at this compared or next to how it was, you'll see that it's a lot shorter than it was. I think it was a little bit below my knees, and now it's a little bit above my knees, so it looks a lot better, I would say, than it was before. So yeah, nice skirt. So the corset consists of 7 panels, if I'm not mistaken, and you just sew them together, so you get this real long shape. And since you're working with leather, you also have to sew down the seam allowance, I suppose. You have to sew on top of the seam you have done to make it flat, or else it will look very baggy and weird. So you have to do this. So here you can see the difference. This one is not stitched, as you can see. It looks very baggy. This one is stitched, it looks really nice with the top stitching. I personally really like top stitching. I find it to be fun. And it adds a little bit of detail as well, which I like. It looks very weird folded out like that, but it looks good on, and that is what matters. And the inside looks like this. Nice, not so nice. And after all of that, you start attaching your boning. And boning was something that I had never done before, so I did a little bit of a oopsie, and I pre-cut all of my pieces, which ended up making them a little bit too small, so I had to reorder some new boning and do everything again. So when you're using plastic boning and you get it on a roll like this, they tend to keep their like bended shape. So what you can do to make them flat is to actually iron them flat. I tried to press them underneath something for a few days, it doesn't work. You have to use heat and press them flat, and that worked perfectly fine. Also protect your boning when you're gonna iron on top of them. Use something in between, because I don't think you should use your iron straight on top of it. So what I'm showing you guys now is how I attach the old boning. So I'm redoing this entire process later without actually filming it, since I had already done everything on camera. But the steps are similar. The only difference is that I added some masking tape on the edges and kept the boning longer. I started sewing the boning on the corset, and then I cut it when I had sewn one line down. This was a real fun process, and I think I learned a lot by making corsets. That's something I want to do more of, make corsets, because they're pretty cool, and being good at it, I think it's a really cool skill to have anyway, so yeah. So if you're gonna mark on leather, it's pretty hard, so what I would recommend is using masking tape, because you can just add a little bit of strip of it, and then draw on top of that to mark out where you want to have the holes for the eyelets. And it works really good, and masking tape is really easy to also take off when you are done. So that's a little bit of a cool trick, I suppose. I really like adding eyelets and grommets and all of those like cool detailing. I think it just makes the entire piece look really cool and professional. Something that is a little bit funny is that the last con I went to, somebody said that using lace up looks very unprofessional, which is just weird, because I personally think it looks pretty cool. And it's also really wild that she also said she was so tired of seeing it. She was so done with seeing cosplayers use lace up, seeing the undergarments. I guess it's not called undergarments, but like seeing the garment underneath the corset, where the, I guess, gap is. when you do lace up. She was so done with it. I was like, please don't do it. It's so unprofessional. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do zipper instead. But it doesn't really make sense using a zipper. I think also using like lace up for princess characters is really pretty. Using a zipper would kind of, I guess, take a little bit away from like the aesthetic, because using lace up for princess characters also just adds to the aesthetic of the princess. Like, it's very princessy, I think. So that's kind of weird. I don't know. It's weird. So I did a little test on leather where I ironed on some vinyl, and it looks like it's sticking pretty well. It looks pretty well, I would say. You get a little bit of like the leather texture on it because you iron it on. So, but it looks like it's actually printed. It looks like the leather is like that, and I think that's pretty cool. My first initial plan for like the triangles on the corset was to also 3D print them or use foam, but using vinyl worked out so well. I think it looks so good, but the triangles around the entire piece, I 3D printed them, and I think it adds a little bit of a dimension as well. Like, you have those large triangles, they are flat on, and then you have the smaller triangles popping out. So there's a little bit of a difference. And all of like the gold detailing, I made them in Blender, and then I 3D printed it. I had to do a lot of sanding, spraying spray speckle on, sanding, a lot of sanding, and then I could paint. And this is what I did with all of like the gold detailing on this costume. This kind of took a long time because my 3D printing didn't work, so I had to fix it. One of the fans was broken, so I needed to buy a new one, and that took me like 3 years because it's been broken that long. But I didn't really know what to do. Just took a long time because I thought it was like stressful to change. It was actually pretty easy, and it worked out fine. I'm really proud of actually fixing it myself, and I'm so happy that I can use my 3D print again and make cool stuff like this. So this is the detailing going in the middle of the corset. It had a lot of like gaps from the printing process, so I added some filler and then let it dry, and then I add spray speckle, sand it, and I did that for a few days actually. It took a while. It takes a really long time to make them smooth. I used this red ribbon, which I just cut in 4 pieces and then made some loops. It doesn't look super nice on the back of the 3D printed piece, but you can't really see it, so it's okay. One mistake I did is that I added magnets to the 3D piece because I was thinking about actually using magnets so you don't damage the leather on the corsets, because punching needles through the leather is gonna leave marks, and I didn't really want that. But the red detailing is very chunky, so the magnet was just really dumb of me. So I wasted 2 magnets. They are stuck on it, the piece, and I kind of want to try and get them out so I can actually use them. I added some O-rings so I could attach the tassels, and unfortunately the tassels are very bright red, while the circles I made are a little bit of a darker red, so they don't match. It looks a bit weird, but it works, And that's the corset for you guys, and I think it looks nice. There's lace up, it looks nice. There's a little bit of a gap, I guess unprofessional, if you're gonna ask that random person at con, you know, but it's my beautiful corset, and I really like it, so it doesn't really matter what anyone else is saying. The color has a really interesting design, so how do I explain what I did? So you had the color piece, and there's supposed to be 3 holes. It looks like you can see the dress underneath, but you actually don't see the dress underneath. It's kind of a illusion, I suppose. So you make 3 separate pieces that matches the whole shape, and you make them a little bit bigger than the hole itself. You iron on some interfacing, which I forgot to do, so the first thing I did was to actually sew the pieces together. And then I had interfacing on top of that, because I forgot to do that before I had sewn the pieces together. So after interfacing is added, after you have sewn the shapes onto the mane, you then start cutting it out. And you cut it out close to where you already have sewn it. I'm using my printing shears to protect the fabric from fraying badly, but this is gonna be encased anyway, so I think it's gonna be fine, but just as an extra security measurement. And after you have cut out the opening, you start to fold in what's left, and then you'll be left with this really beautiful edge, and you iron it flat. And for the next step, you do the same with the same fabric used for the dress. And this time, you top stitch it in place. So there's also some detailing going around the collar piece, and I stitched them on. Around the openings, I try to stitch on top of what I have already stitched, kind of to hide the other stitching, even though it's white so you can't really see it. I use a gray thread for this, and later I also tried to add some silver thread around, which was really hard to sew with this sewing machine, but it worked out in the end with some minor mistakes. I first sewn the detailing design around the openings, and then I baglined both of the pieces, turned it inside out, and then I did all of the edges. After that, you also have to cut into the corners before you turn it inside out, but that's something you do with all corners. You turn it inside out and you press it, so it looks more clean. And this is where you actually attach the real color to the color piece. I added interfacing to just one of the color pieces, but I think I should have done it to both, because the fabric I'm using is very light, and it doesn't really hold its shape very well, since the fabric is very light, so I should have added interfacing to all of the pieces to make them a little bit stiffer, because you want your color to be pretty stiff. So overall, not the best fabric for a color. The first thing I needed to figure out was how I would like to do design on the cape itself. Just figuring out what kind of fabric I wanted to use. I always imagined my cape being suede, so that's the fabric I went with first. And I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to do the design on that kind of fabric. So the first thing I did was to try and airbrush it on. I did a little test. I just taped it and sprayed it to see how it would look. And the result was awful, really bad. Oof. I don't really know why I was thinking that was a good idea. Doesn't really work. Looks very patchy. So overall, bad idea. And then I decided to move away from the suede and go over to satin. I'm not happy with the type of satin I went with, because it wrinkles a lot and I didn't manage to iron it back to being flat and flawless. And I was also just really clueless of how I wanted to do the design. I tried to paint straight onto it. It looked bad, so I scrapped that idea and moved away from that as well. And then I tried the heat and bond method, but it's frying a lot, so I didn't like it. But this is my cape at the moment, but I'm also trying to remake it again with another type of satin, just the Duchess satin, which is so much better than this kind of satin. I don't really know what this is. And I do want to use vinyl, but then I would need to cut the design into 3 or 4 pieces, and there will be a little bit of a seam, and I don't want that. Also been thinking about maybe going back to paint, maybe going back to airbrushing, stencil the design out and then airbrush it, because it's a lot easier to stencil it out than using vinyl to make multiple pieces and try and attach them, because there will be a pretty clear seam that way. I also didn't really film a lot of the cape work, because I was just not happy with the cape. I'm happy with a lot of the other things I did for the costume, so I'm not gonna be overall negative about it. It's just the cape and hate it, and it makes me a little bit sad. Sometimes it is what it is, and I spent so much money on this stupid cape as well. So much money wasted. Because it's just overall, it's a good fabric though. But I kind of wanted to try something new and experience something new. But sometimes you should just stick with what you already know, right? So I did some beading on my cape, added some beads to it, and I really like this, so I'm gonna keep that on my new cape. But I'm gonna move away from beads and do some gems instead and see how that turns out. But I got these really nice gems. I think it's gonna look a little bit better, but I really like the idea of doing beading. And for a color for a cape, I use this really gorgeous fur fabric. Cutting fur can get really messy, and I still find fur pieces to this day. So sewing the color is very straightforward. I use the fur piece, and I also cut out a piece in satin to add interfacing to it to make it a little bit thicker and sturdy piece, which will be the inside of the color. And then you sew them together on the curve, and you keep the other side open, and you turn it inside out. So basically, you are bag lining it. I also used Dutch's satin for the inside piece. A lot of the fur got stuck on the inside of the seam, so I had to do a little bit of tweaking to get them out, so it will look a little bit prettier. So this is the fun part, the 3D modeling. I made all of the pieces in Blender, and then I 3D printed them. This is kind of how I made the vision. Just a bunch of pieces. The triangles on the edges are separate. I don't know if that's the best way of doing it, but this is how I made mine. I then had to 3D print all of them. I just fixed my 3D printer as well, and I got one of those glass beds. I did struggle a little bit with getting it to actually attach to the bed. With a lot of tweaking, I managed to actually make, I would say, pretty good prints. Prints I could use. It actually fell out the window, my piece. Looks fine. Moment of truth. So I hope it fits. It should fit. It does not fit. No, come on. Okay, so I lied. It does actually fit. I shouldn't actually have pressed it down because it's gonna be so hard to get out now. But I'm still gonna, I guess, make it a little bit smaller because I'm gonna cast it in resin, and I would like just some room to make it a little bit easier to get it down, but not too large of a room so it doesn't really look nice. But it fits perfectly. I just had to press it a little bit, so now it's kind of stuck. But I'm gonna try and get it out. You can see I did try because there's like some scratches on it, but yeah. After printing all of the pieces that I would be using, I laid them all out on top of my cutting mat, but I also protected it because I'm gonna spray. I started out with this new spray that I bought, but it was really bad as like a filler. It's better as a primer before paint, so I then had to go and buy one of those spray speckles, and that one worked perfectly fine, really good. They are drying outside of my window. I don't really have a garden. It looks like this on the, I guess the back. More of an escape route, I suppose, behind the house. So no garden, so I'm just spraying a little bit out there. To spray sand, or that's how I do it. And I also needed to fill in some of like the bigger cracks, and I used some kind of filler for that. So I'm gonna take my square piece. I fall a little bit down and it feels a little bit sticky. I don't really understand why it's like that. And I'm gonna use this container because I don't really have anything else I can use. And hopefully I do have enough like silicone base to use, because it would be a bummer if it wasn't enough. But yeah, I'm gonna make a mold. So it should be dry, but this on the table is not, but it might be just the blue without like the what do you call it, catalyst thing. So it didn't set because this is hard. So I'm gonna try and take it out of the container. The container is broken, so I think it should be easier. Should I try to maybe glue it a little bit or something? Because it kind of looks like it moved. Like it doesn't really matter though, because oops, I'm smearing the blue out. I focused a lot on the piece that is gonna be cast in resin because I needed it to be very pretty smooth, so the mold didn't pick up all the print lines. Even though I sanded it a crazy amount, I still managed to get some print lines, and you could see it on the resin as well. But after spraying it, it kind of vanished, so you can't really see it anymore. So it's fine. I also messed up my mold because I didn't actually attach the piece that I was casting. So when I poured into the silicone, the piece itself, it moved while it was setting. So it's a little bit crooked. Also, while I was waiting for the resin to cure, I did paint all of my pieces, my 3D printed pieces. I looked through my paint stash to see which color that would fit gold the most. And then I picked this raw sienna because it kind of looked a little bit goldy, but not really, but it kind of has that feeling. So I painted all of the pieces with that color, and then I went in with this wax-like gold. This was the first time I have used that gold because I never used it before, and it's so shiny and so nice. The only thing that I noticed is that it doesn't actually dry, so even though you put it out to dry for weeks, you can still rub on it and actually get gold on your fingers, but you have to rub a little bit hard though. But it doesn't really matter because you do varnish it anyway. And I use the gold finger varnish that is meant for this type of paint. And after a layer of that, it protects the paint and it doesn't actually rub off. I don't know if you can call it paint since it's not really a paint, but anyway. I think it's similar to rub and buff, but we don't have rub and buff here. And that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to try this gold finger. So I also have it in silver. I got it for Christmas actually. Pretty cool. Just see how fast and shiny the gold get. You would not have gotten this result if you didn't use a good base color. You would need to add a lot of gold layers, and I don't know how easy it is to actually build up this gold finger waxy type of paste. But I had a really good base for this color, so it looks amazing. Doing the vision was a lot of work, but it was also really fun. Here you can kind of see that the there's a lot of resin on the piece that shouldn't really be there, so I had to do a lot of sanding. I sanded it for a few days because it was a little bit tiresome, but I managed to get it pretty smooth and nice, so I could fit it inside the other piece. I had already made all of the, I guess, vision designs, the elements, before, because I'm selling them on my Etsy. I also have uploaded them to my Patreon, so if you are a supporter there, you will be able to access all of the elements as well as the 3D files that I made and some other goodies. I used my Cricut to cut out the geo design on this kind of sticker paper thing. It's very thin, it's really good. This is the first time I have tried this. I bought it for this sole purpose, and I will be buying more of it in the future because it was amazing to work with. I then added the design onto my resin piece, added some masking tape around the entire thing, and this is amazing. Oh, Henrik, you're so good at filming. It's almost like you're a pro at this YouTube thing. Oh, how we can see what you're doing. Anyway, so I'm spraying my piece with orange. I use my airbrush that I also fixed. I have so much damaged stuff. My 3D printer wasn't working, my Cricut wasn't really working because of the mats being old and not sticky anymore, and then my airbrush as well. But now I have fixed everything, and after the orange is dry, I then try to pick off the stencil, and I did a little bit of a oopsie. So I had to take the piece back to the airbrush and airbrush some more orange on it. Boo-hoo, but happens. And after a second time, I tried to do it a bit properly, and I got the stencil off. And this is when you spray it with yellow. And just look how nice it looks. It's so nice. I attached the resin piece to the other piece with epoxy glue. The back side doesn't look super nice and clean, but I just glued the tassel on and the needle for attachments. I thought the entire thing was gold, but then I noticed, oh wait, it's actually supposed to be a little bit of purple inside of it. So the first thing I did is to paint it on. I painted the purple on, and I then decided to add some UV resin with some glitter, so it's all sparkly and nice. UV resin you have to cure under UV light, or you can use the sun as well. And I think this piece looks so beautiful with shine, the glitter, so I'm so happy that I decided to do it this way. And this is how my geo and the other piece turn out. So I have all of my pieces for the new bonnet, I don't really know how to say it. So yeah, I got the very thick or a bit thicker interfacing to make it a bit sturdy and keep it shape. I also have my detail cut out. I could just put it on top of the pattern and actually just draw it because it's very see-through, as you can see. So that's gonna be on top of one of them, and I also have cut out all of the pieces. Something that I struggle with is all of them are kind of crooked. I don't know if you can kind of tell, but I can easily see it. And that's what happened with the other one as well, and that's why I'm making a new one, because I didn't like that one side is more rounded and the other side is more flat, and I can see that it's like this here as well, and I try to line it up pretty well, but I think the fabric is kind of stretching a little bit when you are trying to sketch it, because all of the pieces doesn't really line up very well. Because when I try to fold it on the middle, you can see one side is a little bit, there's some more on one side than the other side, and that is the same for all of my pieces, so I don't really understand what's going on. The headpiece. This was a little bit of a challenging part, because I needed to find out how to make it hold its shape, what to add inside of it, because this is a very structural piece. The instruction says to use buckram, but I personally don't really know what it is or what it would be for me. So I'm just browsing through the, I guess the local fabric store online to find out what I should buy. So I just went with some kind of interfacing. It's a very thick one. In the description it said that it was good for purses, hats and stuff like that, so I thought that would be perfect. And I would still say it was pretty good. It's very thick though. So you got a really structural piece that can also hold all of the detailing very well. When it comes to the detailing on the fabric itself, I did a lot of the same things I have done for most of the costume, where I'll iron on some fabric for detailing and do satin stitches around the corners. I also added some satin stitches for some of the other details as well. Also very good to mark out where you're gonna do your satin stitches, as you can see I have done here. When the stitches is done, I tie a knot on the back and I also add some glue to make it more secure. So the bonnet pieces consist of, I guess, 2 separate pieces that I sew together. So you do the same for the front and the inside. So I did sew it together, but I forgot that I'm also gonna add some ribbon and whatever you call those, buckles, I suppose. Yeah, I'm gonna add that and those to the edges for a better attachment to the other one. I can show you guys the other one. So here is my finished one. So I made some, I guess, some loops, but it didn't really work very well. Or what I was thinking was to just add some loops and then use some clips to just clip it to my wig, but it didn't really work very well. So then I thought using those buckles would be a lot better. So yeah, I bought those, and I think this is gonna be pretty amazing compared to what I had, because what I had didn't work at all. I think I did a better job with the attachment this time around than I did with the first one I made. Having the parachute buckles is a lot easier as well. So this is a little bit of a scary part, so I'm gonna iron on those on high setting, but the fabric itself doesn't deal very well with heat because it's gonna melt, so I have to be a little bit careful. But I'm gonna iron those on with the highest setting on the ironing. I'm also using a damp cloth because I didn't do that the last time, and I hope that helps a little bit doing it more properly this time than I did the last time. If I line it pretty well on the seam allowance, you're gonna see that there's a lot of X's. As you can see, that is so bad, but it's like that on both sides, and it happened the last time I made it as well. And I tried to be very careful with actually drawing and cutting the fabric, and it still looks like this. It's a bummer, but yeah. So I guess I'm just gonna go for it then. Okay, so I have my cloth here, and then I'm just gonna add the iron, and should just leave it for a little while, and then pick it up and off press. I also decided to make a ribbon that I could attach to the bonnet to make it a little bit nicer. So I really like this detail. I also got to test out my roller foot. It was a little bit hard, but I did manage on this piece. And how I attached it is that I firstly added tape, the one that goes away with water, just to make it stay in place. And then I added another ribbon on top of that, and then I did sew it with my sewing machine. It's very thick with the interfacing as well, but I do have a sewing machine that can take kind of thick pieces, so it did work out. So I have now sewn both sides together, so it looks like this. So I'm now gonna add the bias band thing around the entire bonnet. I do think you'll see these stitches, because I didn't really think that through. So I'll probably just um, get rid of those that are showing when it's on, because it's gonna be kind of on top. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna just gonna pin it around. I'm gonna try and get the I guess the overlap at the bottom, and then just attach it on around the entire bonnet. It already looks a lot better than my other one, I would say.
I just explained it to you.
So I have now sewn the ribbon on top of it. So I'm just gonna go around with some fray check on the edges, because as you can see it's fraying a lot, and I want to prevent it from being damaged, even though I'm gonna hide it. But just to be sure, add some of that around the entire bonnet. And yeah, not perfect sewing, I guess. It's also very thick on the edges because of this part, but I did want to have it on the inside like this, but it also makes it hard to turn around, so that's a little bit of a bummer. So yeah, I'm gonna try and hide the stitching, but I should have stitched it at the edge, but yeah, anyway. Just gonna add some of this around every edge. Pin the bias tape around the entire piece, and then you sew it, and then you fold it, and you hand stitch. So here are the yarn which I will be using to make pom-poms for Yun Jin's hat. The colors are really nice and pastel. I really like them. It was also recommended to use acrylic yarn for pom-poms. I have never done pom-poms before, so that will be interesting. I also bought those for these tools which I will be using, so the pom-poms are uniform and the same size, which will be nice. This mat is so much better than the green one, but this one is so small. It's actually from Nerdforge, if you watch her on YouTube. So it's a really nice mat. I just use it mostly for like aesthetics, like photos, videos, and I don't use it to craft on because it's so pretty. So I use the green one. The green one is boring. It's so boring, but it's a bigger one, but it's hard to find cutting mats that has nice colors. But anyway, I'm gonna show you guys how I make my pom-poms. I watched one video, so I am actually a professional now, so I'm gonna teach you guys how to do it using those pom-pom tools. So you just open it like this, you wrap it, or you start wrapping it like this, and then you just keep on going until you have the whole thing covered. Also a bit hard with the thread like that. Okay, so now we have both sides wrapped around in thread, and what you want to do now is cut open in the middle here on both sides, which can be a bit tricky. So yeah, this is the part I kind of hate because it's so hard to cut. Okay, so now it looks like this when I have cut it open, and my hand is kind of hurting because that is tough work. So now you need another thread, and I like to have it a little bit big. So you take your thread and you have to take it down in the middle here and wrap it around your little puff ball, and try and not break it, which can be a bit hard sometimes. So tight. So I think that's good. And then you make a knot on your thread, and you also have to get that down in the middle and try and not break it. I sometimes break a few. Okay, so now you have your thread on. Now you can start opening, and this is kind of the fun part. Bam, bam. It's a ball. It's a ball, and you also have to take apart this whole thing. Yeah. What in the hell? Okay, like that. And then make it more secured, because you can see that it's a bit loose. Make it way more secure after it's open, because I find it to be a bit easier to do it this way. And then you can start actually cutting it, because you see you have some that are this one is kind of crazy, but you see that you have some that are a bit longer, so you just start trimming the ball. And this is also a bit of a messy job, so I like to go around making everything look nice. Biom. So you can see that I have actually already made a few balls, so it's gonna look something, I guess, like this. Yeah, on the and I'm missing I'm missing two. So yeah, they look nice. I can show you guys. This is one that I have worked a little bit with, and here is one that I haven't worked or done anything with. It looks very messy. It doesn't look very nice. This looks way better, I would say, but it could be even better. I just glued the tassel on the gems pretty easy, and I then just glued it on top of the bonnet. And I can proudly say that I'm very happy with how the bonnet turned out. I think I did a really good job on this one. So this is the finished bonnet. I have never done anything like it before, so I did learn a lot by making this piece, and I'm really happy with it. So this is my entire Yun Jin cosplay. Looks nice. I also have the braids that I made. I didn't show the wig progress at all, I think, but yeah, I just glued some wefts on top of a clip, so they don't look super nice. It's very chunky and doesn't look that nice, but this is gonna be hidden underneath the headpiece. I didn't bother to put them on now, because I just took some pictures and you don't really see it because it's in the back. So yeah, that's the braid. I think the braid itself looks nice, it just the top doesn't look nice. So if I'm at a con and I have them on top of my wig, I don't take the headpiece off because they're ugly. I also made the gems that you can see on top of my wig. I have 3D printed them. It's the same model as the one, I guess the one's on top of the bonnet, if you can see, no idea, and my corset as well. So I just scaled them down a lot and glued them on top of the wig with the spirit gum, which is kind of a face glue, I suppose. I also have all of the 3 files I made on my Patreon. They are, a lot of them are good. I think I did a really good job on the vision though. This is like my proudest piece so far, I would say. I'm pretty happy with it, it's so pretty. So yeah, if you want anything you see, I do have them on my Patreon. I don't really have a lot on my Patreon, so I'm gonna try and upload more cosplay stuff as I make them. I'm currently working on Alice from Madness Returns, and I'm making the skull, which is gonna be on back of her bow. Yeah, apron bow on the back. So that will be on my Patreon as well whenever that is done. I'm trying to make the ghost face mask as well, so that will be there eventually when I get it done. So stuff is coming, it just takes a while, you know. But I have been thinking about maybe putting it on my coffee page as well. If you just want to buy my 3D files, you could. I have other files there as well, so you should totally check it out anyway. I did use a pattern I bought for his entire costume. Highly recommend it. It's really nice to just be able to make something without pattern making it. I still had to do some drafting. I'm currently working on a new cape as well, but I don't really know how to make it. I was thinking about painting it, using vinyl. I did buy vinyl, but the issue is that it's so big. If you see on the back, design the design is super big, so it doesn't really fit on my Cricut machine. Super annoying. So I'm still trying to figure out what to do with it. The cape is made out of satin, and the new fabric above it also satin, so that is this fabric I will be using. I just don't really know how to do the detailing, but I might make a stencil and just airbrush it. I'm gonna figure it out anyway. I also put on some nails because I wanted to look cute for some photos. Thumb is gone, no idea what happened to it. It's somewhere on the floor, I suppose. So I've spent a really long time on this costume. I think I started in January, and then I have spent like almost the entire year on it. Not because it took that long, because of money. Because so usually when I get my money, I can buy some fabrics and start, or whatever materials I need, and then start, and then I have to wait for next month, buy something, next month, buy something. So one other reason that I haven't uploaded a lot of videos lately, or I filmed some con videos, but I don't think they are super good, so I just scrapped that entire idea. I'm gonna try and do better, but I have gained a lot of weight, so many of my older cosplays, I guess most of them, actually all of them, they don't fit anymore. This one fits obviously because it's my newest one. So I've been just struggling a lot with that fact, I suppose. I've been depressed and stuff, and that's one of the reasons I guess I can gain that much. And that's part of life, and that's okay. Just life happens. So I'm trying to be better, do better, just do whatever I like regardless, you know. So yeah, working with myself, I guess.